Hello everybody and welcome back. Today our topic is going to be about the cardiac cycle. We'll start with the definition. So the cardiac cycle is the sequence of mechanical and electrical events that repeats with every heartbeat. It can also be measured from the period of time from the beginning of one heartbeat to the beginning of the next one. Or it can also be measured by the sequence of filling and pumping of blood in the heart. The cardiac cycle duration is the reciprocal of the heart rate. So the duration, which is seconds per beat, is equal to 60 over heart rate, which is beats per minute. So the length of the cardiac cycle, which is the frequency, subtracted from the duration relation. There are two phases in the cardiac cycle. The systole, which is the contraction, and the diastole, which is the relaxation. The atriums and the ventricles do not contract and relax in the same time during the cardiac cycle. During the cardiac cycle, the valves which control the one-way direction of blood flow are tendinous, which prevent the atrium and ventricle valves from turning inside out. They also contract, which forms an atrial systole, pumping the blood via the atrioventricular valves into the ventricles. Then the ventricles contract, forming the ventricle systole, causing the atrioventricular valves to shut and the semicircular valves to open, allowing blood out of the heart. This is followed by relaxation, which is the diastole of the ventricles, and the semilunar valves shut. The cycle is then repeated over and over again. The cardiac cycle, which is the closing and opening of the cardiac valves, define four phases of the cardiac cycle: the atrial systole, atrial diastole, ventricle systole, and ventricle diastole, which are divided into further details under each one. So, the cardiac cycle has 8 steps. The first step, which is the atrial systole, it is the pumping of the blood into the ventricles during the last part of the ventricle diastole. The second step, which is part of the ventricle systole, is the isovolumic contraction. The third step, which is still the ventricle systole, is the rapid ventricular ejection. The fourth one, it's also ventricular systole, it is the reduced ventricular ejection. Fifth one is ventricular diastole and is the isovolumic ventricular relaxation. Sixth step is the ventricular diastole and it's the rapid ventricular filling. The seventh step is also ventricular diastole, it's the slow or reduced ventricular filling. And finally the eighth step, which is the atrial diastole, it's during all the ventricle systole and part of the ventricle diastole. So for the atrial systole, it takes about duration of 0.1 seconds. It changes in intra-atrial pressure from 0 to about 4 to 6 mm mercury in the right atrium, and from 0 to about 7 or 8 mm mercury in the left atrium. It has functional significance of contributing to the ventricular filling, but it's not essential for it, so it only contributes. The atrial systole also has a functional significance in the primer pump for the ventricles. It also has the venous pulse, which is the A wave. The atrial systole also causes the fourth heart sound. For the atrial diastole, it takes a duration of about 0.7 seconds. Changes in diastolic intra-atrial pressure cause physiological changes in the C and the V waves and pathological changes in the valves. For the ventricle systole, the atrioventricular delay in impulse conduction is caused. It has a duration of about 0.27 seconds, and it has three phases, which are the isovolumic contraction, which has a 0.05 second duration out of the 0.27 total of the ventricular systole. The second phase of the ventricular systole, which is the rapid ejection, which takes about 0.09 seconds, and it empties about 70% of the blood in the heart. And finally, the third phase of the ventricular systole, which is the reduced or the slow ejection, which takes about 0.13 seconds and empties about 30% of the blood. For the ventricular diastole, it has a duration of about 0.53 seconds, and the phases of the ventricular diastole are protodiastole, which takes about 0.04 seconds, isovolumic relaxation with 0.08 second duration, rapid filling with 0.11 seconds, slow filling with 0.19 seconds, and finally the atrial systole with 0.11 seconds. So these were the cardiac cycle steps and durations of the phases. Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon again in the next video.